Well, it's morning in America. Uh, you could tell because there's been several mass shootings in the last few days. Uh, it's pretty wild. I mean, yesterday it's hard to keep track of them all. I was like around 12 o'clock, 12:30. I was getting ready for. I do like a Wednesday 1:30, like half-hour time slot live on the radio talking about politics and boxing. And they always want me to talk, the political situations going on. And, Monday was the SCOTUS, Supreme Court ruling that federal agents can target Latinos for the way they look, or if they're working at a low wage job, if they're speaking Spanish in public, that it's okay to kind of racially profile them, not kind of, but actually. And so at the same time, like Charlie Kirk was politically assassinated yesterday, and I saw that video, and that kind of was wild. Um, like just blocks from my house, ICE or federal agents, they didn't identify themselves, like broke open the window of a car, pulled it over to the side, pulled out three people. They all turned out to be legal residents, one of them an American citizen who was pregnant, threw her up against the car, handcuffed everybody and rousted them and then let them go, with no consequences for that action. Um, and then there was a school shooting right after Charlie Kirk was killed. Like all these things, are part of our landscape where everything's happening all at once if you have the wrong timeline. Um, or if you live in the country and you pay attention to politics. So it was a pretty wild day. And then I went on the air and talked about it all, and tried not to be incendiary and not celebrate the death of somebody who I considered, a not a political opponent of mine, but somebody that I did not disagree with or did not agree with the things that they said and how they said them, and the kind of hate and vitriol that they poured into young minds on purpose across the country. Um, it's a wild day that kind of makes you check yourself and see who you are. So I don't know, where are you at? You're in Vegas, right, for the fight?
Yeah, I'm in Vegas for the fights, and where I am in my mind is boxing. What I've been doing is paying much more close attention to the little bubble in which the things that are directly and immediately relevant to me, my career, my life, have impact. So there's so much noise in the world, and because I call it noise, doesn't mean that it is of not significance, but I can't take it all in and then also listen to the people in my life and the signals that I'm being given about which direction I need to go for the aims and goals that I have. So I'm finding that so much is going on from so many different
Hmm.
angles, whether it be social media, your friends talking, the news updates, the constant barrage of tweets and official wires from the government, international affairs, governments around the world. I could spend every day, all day engaged and engrossed in other people's lives and experiences that are not directly relative to what's going on in my life on the day at the time. And it's uh, seductive, the news. It is entrancing, the social media timelines and the reels and the constant infiltration of other people's ideas and thoughts and humor and life. You can easily transplant your own existence with just an observational deck to everybody else's.
Mm-hmm.
And in this particular moment, I was more narrowly focused on what I'm doing because it is a big fight week. There's a big transition happening in the landscape of the field I've chosen as a profession. I've made some moves personally as to where I reside and how I'm going to pursue my life and happiness. So all of that is in flux in a way, and I've got to metabolize what's going on there in the micro, my life, and how I'm going to live. And because I do have a public life as a part of my existence, how I'm going to present that change to the world and to my fans alike. So this event that has taken over social media, has taken over the news in the last 24 hours, in the context of all these other things that have been happening in the last 24 months, if not, just since the election of this new government, it all came like crashing in. And I was happy that in the moment I wasn't just on a week off in my bed, doom scrolling, just consuming all the news that was coming
Yeah.
across the wire. I actually was fully distracted. So this kind of felt like it came out of left field. And I'm not well versed in or at least 24 hours ago, I wasn't well versed in the Charlie Kirk universe.
Mm.
In fact, several weeks ago, a reel came across my timeline, and my comment was, "Who the fuck is Charlie Kirk?" And then a bunch of fucking college kids, you know, were barraging my comment with, either he's a great American or he's a total piece of shit or he's a fascist or he's, the next president, which sometimes these are not two respectively different ideas. Apparently, both of those things can be
Yeah.
true.
Why is
Uh,
his face so small on such a big head? Was always my question.
but because I think I had that distance from it, and now I am taking this all in at one time, I'm a lot less fascinated than I think most people whose reaction I'm getting about the nature of his ideology, even the impact of it. I am more fascinated with our reaction to this moment in time and how I'm old enough to have unfortunately seen other assassinations.
Mhm.
I'm just young enough to have missed the ones that I think most greatly shaped the generation that I'm from, which is uh, JFK, King, X, even Gandhi. Like all of those assassinations were before my time, but they were the ones that my parents and family
Should
members
not.
were dealing with and contextualizing their world view through. I'm old enough to have seen the attempt on uh, Ronald Reagan, right?
I remember that day.
Uh,
Yeah.
and the amount of, I thought, careful nature given to assassinations and attempts alike, and the value of the evening news or that anchor to come across and give you the latest updates. And there was a time that we would all run to CNN no matter what your political leanings, because they were going to have the most objective, up to date, or up to the minute reporting. And we kind of all agreed when there was national tragedy or national or natural disaster, that kind of like a CNN, when cable news was the hub, was the place to go to get up to the minute. And then you waited on the evening news for that anchor you trusted to tell you the truth and give you some perspective.
I
And
remember
now,
9/11. I woke up and turned on the cable and put in VHS tapes and just started recording the news, so I bought on
right,
the record. But
right.
you're saying now,
Now it's just any Tom, Dick, and Harry with a phone or a computer and a pal are jumping on and telling you what you're supposed to think, or telling you whether or not, this is justified or an outrage, whether you're crying or celebrating. I find this moment to be one that could actually pivot the way we engage each other, right? Like, this guy is so polarizing and yet so far out of my purview until this assassination, if we're even calling it that. The lack of information about
yeah,
what actually happened and the amount of conclusions jumped to in the last 24 hours is staggering. Like,
it's
yes, of
fun.
course, at any time when something crazy happens that shakes up the world, there's going to be speculation. There's going to be conspiracies immediately, but there's not going to be an equal and voice and opportunity for everybody to put those forward uh, on a level playing field of fact. So there's no real single source you can go to trust. Whether or not there ever was, there were single sources that we did trust. And now I think what we got to trust is that maybe these things that this guy was bringing to the forefront and echoing are worth discussing. Like, it's the only single thing I can see in this moment that can make it productive and bring value to it, no matter from which angle you're looking at. Those who are devastated, who believe in this ideology, who wanted this man heard, who wanted to echo his sentiments and consider his point of view, well, this is his moment. It's now. You're never going to have heard more from this individual and his point of view and his sound bites than you have in the last 24 hours. Certainly that's true for me, and I am no guy living under a rock. But if you want Charlie Kirk heard, if you want those ideals put forward and this ideology explored, now is the time to do that. Now is the time to say, hey, this is what he believed. This is what convinced me that he was a person of value that had something reasonable or productive or positive to say. He was going to save America, whatever you think. Well, make that case to the people who object to that point of view, who are maybe infuriated by that ideology, who are affected by this rise of however you want to label this
Fascism.
sentiment,
Yeah.
and give
White
that
nationalism.
side an opportunity to metabolize what they're experiencing in this moment. It can be devoid of celebration, and it can also um, be a moment where even those who are in pain can appreciate that we're not all affected by this individual the same way, even if almost all of us are affected by senseless violence the same way. Those two things are going to have to be separated in this context because he was such an affecting character on people's lives, and the way that he is seen and the things that he said carried so much weight and had so much impact on the youth that you can't look at this simply as uh, an isolated incident of violence. And if we did look at it that way, there wouldn't be nearly as much reaction, because look at all the violence happening in the world that is in fact senseless. How many innocent people are being murdered on a daily basis? How much violence through guns, bombs, wars, famine, genocide are happening around the world daily that doesn't garner this even close to this level of effect on the people who ascribe to this ideology. So if that's the case, then you're not reacting to violence. It's not because his parents or his children won't have a father. It's not that. It's because his children won't have a father. It's not about fatherless children. It's because violence has visited this individual by the way of a gun, not because gun violence is something you abhorrently object to in every case. It is because it has come home. This thing has visited you personally, and now all of these things have become paramount in your mind and are affecting you as an individual. I'm saying, let's talk about what it is that made you so passionate about him, and what it is that made other people so passionate about objecting to him, and give his ideas a fair hearing, an
Well,
airing that lacks the kind of vitriol or violence that these debates would normally take the shape of. I think we can do that. I think we can, and I get it. Like, some people will be like, "Well, it's the last thing we want to do is talk about this guy," but he affected so many people, and he's right now in so much of our awareness that you can't shut it down. So put these ideas to the test. That's fair for everybody.
well, it was interesting that we were recently doing the Jubilee, watch parties, and you were asking like, where did this all come from? This whole debate thing, and I think you can tie it back to Charlie Kirk in a large part. Unlike yourself, I'm fully aware of Charlie Kirk. I have been for years. Before he became a major player on the political stage within the Trump campaign, I knew who he was because I follow the far right. And that's exactly what he was a far right ideologue, couching his white nationalism and his bigotry in things like anti DEI or anti woke, which are all just code words. They would be different words if we were in the 60s or in the 30s, but we would know exactly what those phrases were. So, I'm not celebrating his death. um, I'm not shedding a tear for it either. I am a person, as I've told you before, I'm anti-war, I'm anti-violence, even though I'm an ex-boxing writer. Um, but I don't believe there was a great piece yesterday by an outlet called The Fucking News that basically said that the person that killed him failed to do exactly what you're talking about. Charlie Kirk went across the country doing the debate me bro kind of tour. That was what he did, what he was actively doing when he was shot, was debating about mass shootings and, kind of talking trash about trans people, talking in coded language about black people. And then he was shot. Um, but the person that shot him wasn't debating him. That person decided that the debate was over and that they were going to end it with a bullet. And so they failed. Political violence, just any violence, begets more violence. The guy once said to me that as long as there's war, there'll be boxing, and as long as there's boxing, there'll be war. As long as we treat violence as, sport, essentially, and as an acceptable means to solve problems, we're going to have violence. We haven't,
Hold on.
we
Hold
haven't,
on.
we haven't, well, we haven't
Well,
just,
look, okay. Look, point of order.
okay.
Boxing is not violence.
Yes, it is.
Boxing is competition.
Boxing is
Boxing is
violence
not
for money.
violence.
You,
Boxing is competition. It is
nope.
an agreed upon set of rules that two men or women engage in based on their athletic prowess.
You're getting
And
fancy. It's violence,
that
dog.
is
It's violence for
pugilism. There
money.
is
The
actually
goal.
it's a minimalist science.
What does
If you
James
want to,
Toney call boxing?
what's that?
What does James Toney call boxing?
I can't understand anything James Tony says.
The
The
hurt business. And why can't you understand what he's saying?
I don't mean
Because
because of speech
he's
impediment. I
been
mean 20
hit
years
so many
ago, he
times,
still
his brain is
wasn't making a
damaged.
lot of sense.
Now you're doing a justification of
No,
what it is.
listen.
And so he was like, I got 2 judges from now on, and these are the only ones I'm gonna do. And
And
that's what
there
we
you have the failing of humanity, but not the sport of boxing. And so, in this abstract conversation about boxing, considering the context of our original conversation, this is the kind of debate that we should, not you and I, but I think people who are so greatly affected by this murder, and I'm calling it a murder, not a political assassination,
okay.
not
If we
political
don't know the
violence yet,
motivation. Yeah,
because all of that means that you have intention. You know what the motive is.
right.
We
You have
don't
a
know.
manifesto or yeah, a
We know
person.
so little, and granted, I'm going to couch this by saying it's a crazy way to think of what we've just witnessed, but we know so little that that could have been uh, a shot meant for someone else.
Hmm.
That's how little we know. Do I think that's the case? Certainly not. But I'm saying that we have so little information that everything that we are assuming, even if it's based on what we would consider logic, common sense, past experience, is still just an assumption. And the fact that those assumptions have led us immediately to this is coming from the left. This is political violence. This is assassination. This is the violent left tendencies, and everyone is immediately putting on their jerseys, putting on their side of the the Civil War. None of this is in evidence. It's all what's created and existing in your mind already.
Hmm.
None of this is in evidence. So
What you mean that we're at a civil war? You don't think we are?
that this is a product of it or an instigation of it. That this is connected to whatever you define a civil war as. That this has anything to do with anything.
Um, I'll
It
push
could be
back
a
on that.
complete lunatic who
I
has no political leanings that shot this guy. It could who like the point is we don't know. And we will know, I believe we will. Whether or not we'll be able to trust the sources that tell us will probably be another show. But we in this moment when we know so little before those definitions can be put upon this action, it might be the best time to have an honest, objective, non-violent, non-hyperbolic debate about what this person meant to society and what his ideology was and its effects on society
Well,
before we can start pulling those fucking labels and people stop listening to each other.
well, I think it's important to remember the context, like, that he was killed in. Um, he's long been he's people have been calling him a conservative activist, so I will give him that, so we won't argue that. Um, I thought he was a far right agitator. Um, but he spent a lot of his time in high schools and colleges going after young white conservatives and trying to pull them into his fold. When you look at that, granted, it was in Utah in a particularly white area and a very conservative area. So it was a lot of white people in that crowd, mostly. I didn't see any people of color. Um, but he was a provocateur, and he's also like a top Trump advisor. He would vet people that were getting political appointments and things. So it's important to keep him in the context in which he exists. He didn't exist in a vacuum. He was out there as a foot soldier, as a 31-year-old guy capturing the youth vote. And he was very, key in gathering that youth vote for Trump. Uh,
Okay. But is it important to keep him personally in the context? I mean, there's two different conversations we can have. The people like you who are well informed and have had experience with him for years and followed what he's been doing and him as a personality. You know him, right? I'm so glad in a way that I didn't because I feel like I'm more objective and less affected in this moment because I had no pre-existing emotions tied to this guy. So for me, the conversation that I'd like to have that I think is more important and may only be able to be had for the next handful of hours, hopefully a day or two, if the conversation were to actually surface, which is about what was it that was attracting these high school or college campus kids? Was it his haircut, his cut of his jib, his accent? Was he incredibly attractive? Was it his muscles? Probably not. It was probably what he was saying, right? So before I need to define him as a person, or whether or not he was a good husband, or whether or not he was a shill or a fascist or whatever. Let's just deal with his ideas because that's what drove him, right? That's what made him whatever he was. I would like to deal with his ideas somewhat in a vacuum. I would like to maybe take out of the water all of the personal feelings about the individual and the vitriol lofted to the thought to be opponents of the individual and deal with the ideas that are really what is sweeping his fan base and these college campuses and government. It's the ideas that will live beyond him, that he will be martyred for the ideas, not necessarily his individual personality or physical appearance or
yeah, I'm
whatever.
not. I'm not talking about any of that other than his small face, but I am dealing with his ideas. He was a white nationalist. He famously said that if he got on a plane and saw a black pilot, he would be worried that the guy wasn't qualified, which is an inherently racist thing to say.
Right.
Uh,
Okay. So there you go.
when,
So, right.
when,
So this
when,
is
hang on, when Nancy
okay.
Pelosi's husband was attacked by a man at their home with a hammer, he said that a patriot should bail that guy out and celebrated it. He was a hate monger. There's
Right.
no
But that,
getting
that,
around that.
the first thing that you said in the soundbite that you quoted would give me a reaction to racism. The second thing that you said in the soundbite, or not even a soundbite, but the soundbite that you quoted in reference to what happened to Nancy Pelosi's husband, would give me a reaction to violence. So the conversation that can be had is about how we feel about violence and how we come to these racial perspectives. And it's a very difficult ask, I appreciate, which is why I'm looking for a very unique moment to have it, this conversation, is if we could have a conversation specifically about those elements of these ideologies that are being put forward and strip away the offensive nature of the person or even the motivation of the person putting it forward, but accept that these ideas are attractive to enough people for us to be in the social circumstances and then the government that we're experiencing right now. I'd like to talk to someone who is right now affected by violence, that is mourning a violent act by someone they care about, look up to, whose ideology they believe in or want to put forward and want to support. That's an emotion they're feeling about something right now that is very tangible. And while I don't want to talk about the individual, I want to talk about how you feel about violence right now. This is something that the ideology of this man speaks to. And he had his opinion about what should happen to the person who visited violence on Nancy Pelosi's husband. So, how does that jive with those in mourning right now about violence? How do those two things reconcile for you? Is it is violence, like I say, violence isn't boxing? You say violence is boxing. Well, is violence not Nancy Pelosi's husband, but it is Charlie Kirk? You know, is violence war, but not boxing? That's what I mean. To be fair, Gabe, I was winding you up a little bit so I could get to this point. We're talking about violence, and from my perspective, based on my bias, based on what is palatable to me about the sport that I love and have made a career of, when you call it violence, the connotations or what I think you're saying about my sport triggers me to say that's not violence. This is point scoring. I'm going to ignore the violent nature of how you score points. I am going to minimize the effectiveness of violence to get wins, championships, money in your purse, and stardom in the sport, and really boil it down to something that is true but not honest. I am going to put it in a context that's hard for you to argue because it's such a simplification of what is true. And I will immediately deny the greater context and the truth of what you're saying by not acknowledging that which triggers me to have to look at something I love in the context of something I hate, right? That's what's happening. That conversation we had about violence in boxing and war and all of that, that is just really my version of a microcosm, a kind of absurd conversation because we both know what we're actually talking about. But that's how these conversations work when you talk about fascism, when you're talking about racism, when you're talking about gun violence. You'll have, if it's not immediately affecting the person who is emotionally triggered by the violence, then I can be professorial about the definition of violence and what
Yeah.
the aim of boxing is and whether or not you can win a fight without technical violence or even the intention of violence. I can win a fight simply, I'm just here to score. And this is how you score. Is that inherently violent? No. What about gang violence? You know what I mean? When you asked about how many gun deaths there are, then you throw, well, including gang violence? That is something to misdirect your emotion towards something that
Or
you
like,
have an affinity
how many
for,
trans shooters
racism,
and,
or
and he said too many. And it's like, well, he's obfuscating the fact that whites overwhelmingly are white males are shooters. They're mass
yeah,
shooters.
even when you incorporate gang violence, they're still going to top the
They're
charts.
still going to
But
top
you
the chart.
slip that in so that we can have a conversation about something else or oversimplify his position, which
Well,
really is some violence is good and some violence is bad. Violence that visited people who have less humanity or in a way deserve it, for however I justify that, well, that's good violence. But we're not going to consider that in the connotations of the negative element of gun violence. That is the permissible violence that gives us our Second Amendment rights. That those deaths are the ones that are acceptable to hold on to our Second Amendment rights. But the one we saw yesterday, boy, I bet that's not an acceptable one for the
no, because I
very
mean,
same
look at
ends.
the coverage yesterday, wall to wall coverage. And granted, he was an important conservative figure, arguably the most important. At 31, he was a propagandist going across the country, getting the youth vote. And as much as like the left, there's that kind of that meme, they're looking for the left wing Joe Rogan, or whatever. Like this guy was going to be more powerful than a Rogan. He's not like Rogan's kind of like the 21st century Johnny Carson in a sense. You got to go on his show and you get kind of ordained. Um, we can leave that conversation to the side, but Kirk was picking up that youth vote in a very popular, YouTube channel. I think he had his own like .com, so he's running it out of there. But this was like the new Alex Jones, but not steeped in conspiracy theory, but steeped in misinformation, and who was unapologetically racist. And he couched it in things like you're saying, kind of obfuscating. Like I think language can be violent when you keep saying there's an invasion of brown people of this country, and then that translates into real world violence. You fomented violence. Um, and but it depends on, it's like that old phrase, the Paul Mooney phrase, the complexion for the protection of the collection.
Yeah,
Uh,
but I think in my current wisdom, I am less triggered by personalities and less distracted by the offensive nature of their presentation or even their intent. I'm more intrigued with ideas that have resonance because just like Alex Jones, who's still alive, but not nearly as impactful, whose show's been taken down, who's lost this lawsuit, who's gotten bankrupted, all these things
as he should have.
still exists, but he's not the guy we're talking about. Or we weren't, he's not the guy. 48 hours ago, Charlie Kirk, way more powerful than fucking Alex Jones. 2 years ago, it's all Alex Jones, and nobody, I won't say nobody, but very few people would have known Charlie Kirk, and I barely knew him today, but he's still far more powerful. The faces and the personalities and the objective intentions of these people will change. They will come and they will fucking go.
But
The ideas, though, are the
listen,
ones that seem to resonate. These are
white
ideas fucking 100 years ago, where
white
everybody's calling these
nationalism.
guys Nazis and shit like this. Well, Hitler's long gone, but the idea is what remains. It is that we've got to be able to separate from these personalities and these presentations that are meant to be attractive. They're meant to be
Mhm.
young, attractive guys or charismatic orators, or generals with the inherent honor and valor that you will respect what they say, even if it's not something that you would expect from your neighbor. These these Trojan horses that bring these ideas into every generation, we got to stop being distracted by the horse and look what's inside of it. If we can put these conversations to the test and stop being uh, tricked by attacking the individual who will come and go, we might be able to come to some common ground on what we really believe as a society and not what we just believe for ourselves.
But both
This is one
sides
of
have
those
to
moments.
come to the table and be good faith actors, and Charlie Kirk was many things. A good faith actor was not one of those. His whole "I'm gonna go across the country and debate people" really wasn't about debate, because when you're arguing with lies and misinformation, you're not gonna be debating in good faith. You're just getting out your talking points, and you're using the other person as a meme,
But are
or as
those college kids who are at those rallies, who have his poster on the wall, if posters on the wall is even still a thing, maybe his face on their Instagram wall, are they still young enough, impressionable enough, open-minded enough, objective enough to be able to have conversations about these ideas without having the kind of um, good faith actor uh, uh, deficit that a Charlie Kirk may have had? Can
I
these
don't know,
guys are
because
these kids are still coming to this honestly? They're still trying to figure shit out. So if we can have a conversation
I
where
don't
we're
know.
figuring things out, then I think that is a productive use of their energy and intellect, where maybe another generation doesn't have to approach all the same shit the same way and end up with the same
If
results.
if you're coming to Charlie Kirk and you're agreeing with him that the problem in the country is not billionaires, but it's immigrants, and that other civilizations, as Charlie Kirk said, are inferior to Western civilization, and that just comes from the Bible, as he said, um, what are you doing? You know?
You're probably trying to figure the world out at 22. You
Yeah,
probably just left your parents' house 2 or 3 years ago, if you're not living at home while you're in college.
yeah,
And
but
you're
man,
dealing.
I was 22 and I was actively dealing with Nazis. Like, I never played footsie with bullshit like that.
Yeah, but
And
Gabe, you
I'm
come.
a brown. Hang on, you're doing a lot of filibustering today, and I actually am an expert on this subject. I've at least spent many years reading about this subject and studying white nationalism. At some point, you got to break with hanging out with a bunch of people that look fucking like you. That whole crowd surrounding Charlie Kirk was a sea of white people, and they're all reaffirming each other's belief that we're the fucking problem. Like you talk about violence, this guy wanted what happened blocks away from my house. A pregnant woman ripped out of her car, rousted, two legal residents rousted by masked gunmen, and he was fine with that. And I would say that we've gotten to this place because we've uh, not dealt with the ideas. We've dealt with these charlatans. Like, I'm not attacking Charlie Kirk and chasing demagogue to demagogue. I'm actually the guy in my group that says the idea of white power and white nationalism is what we have to attack. That Trump, he got replaced for a minute with Elon Musk in the media. Then it's Alex Jones, then it's Charlie Kirk. There'll always be a new figurehead spouting this bullshit. The key is to get out and have conversations with people that don't look like you, that don't act like you, that don't come from a culture like you, and that to me is the key, not debating the Charlie Kirks of the world.
No, but I don't know why you think I'm filibustering, because we're saying the same thing, but you're still focused on the individual, which is where I want to keep jumping in. Because at the end of the day, you just got to where I started, which is it is the idea and the fact that these kids are sitting around with people who look like them is because they likely largely come from communities that look
Mm,
like them, from high schools that look like
right.
them, from obviously families that look like them, to go to schools with people from those same communities and families from around the same country as
Gotcha.
them. And so in this moment, sadly, when they are hurting, and what's sad about it is that people are hurting. Sadly, while they are hurting and maybe open to a discussion, while they can potentially see the conflict between their reasoning when it comes to violence, when it comes to dehumanizing someone, when it comes to a lack of empathy. You want empathy now, don't you? So, right now, let's discuss the theory of empathy and whether or not it really is a political woke ideal, or if it's something that's human,
It's
that
just
humans
human.
should feel for other humans. And to you, growing up in a different kind of environment with a different intellect, experiencing different kind of people, learning empathy as a child, you probably don't even remember the moment that you realized you had it because you were raised in a community that valued it.
Well, I don't
These
know about
some
that.
of these people, some of these, well, it may not be your immediate family, but you've become this person, right? So
Yeah.
maybe I'm wrong. I assume that maybe at some point you realize, hey, this is what empathy is, and I want to have it. But I do think, and if that weren't your experience, and maybe that's even more evidence that people don't just come to that naturally at a young age. They are greatly influenced by their environment, and they could easily compartmentalize what's happening to them as something that inherently, even if they don't use the word, requires empathy. Because how could you not? I mean, his kids have lost a father. The mother has lost her husband. Like, he was just brutally murdered in front of us. You saw this guy violently die on television. How could you not feel something for that? And in the same breath, not see any relation to that and someone being shot by a police officer in the back because the cop felt for his life was in danger, or a child in Gaza starving to death, or a
Yeah.
building being blown up while there is no image of the body parts flying about or the necks being blown off of the head. It's just a acceptable violence for which only woke people would have empathy. And in this moment where they're actually feeling something, it would be difficult, I think, for them to reconcile those two things and not see that, well, maybe my ideology or my thinking on this is inherently conflicted with what I want for myself. I don't want for others what I want for myself. And what do I feel? What do I want in this moment for this person I love, or this person I admire, or this person that I feel like represents me? How I'm feeling right now. What do I want for my fellow man, my fellow American, for my political system? How do I want it to be acknowledged? Well, if that is what you feel for yourself, can you not see that this is how others might feel for themselves in their moments? That the very people that you're looking to honor this man in his death are the very people who are denying other people's honor and their deaths, or in some cases are the ones visiting the very violence that brings about those deaths on people. You're not going to change a Donald Trump. You're not maybe going to change a Charlie Kirk. You're not going to necessarily change an Alex Jones, but you might change a whole fucking college campus of these sycophants who don't recognize the conflict in their ideology and who might still sincerely be trying to shake themselves as adults. That's the only hope we have. Like, that's it.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, it was definitely a conflicting moment for myself because I knew who he was, and I'm not a follower of the Bible in terms of I'm an organized religion guy, but I was raised in it. I was an altar boy and all that for like the first like 15 years of my life, um, and I just thought a couple of phrases came to mind. You reap what you sow, and he who troubleth his own home shall inherit the wind. Um, it made me sad because his ideas don't get to be, as that article really eloquently put it, don't get to be defeated by better ideas. Um, but that also that, and I think we saw this. We were talking about the reaction. Trump immediately is talking about doing an investigation into all people who support left ideology, and the people that maybe have brought about the death of Charlie Kirk. Stephen Miller, his top advisor, uh, is basically saying the same thing. Elon Musk tweeted that the left is the party of murder, which is the left isn't a party. Last I checked, there isn't a party named the left that's on the ballot. But I would say to those people that are in the crowd with Charlie Kirk that you should be wary of people that use a moment like this, sans knowing who did it, sans a manifesto or any evidence whatsoever, that these are the people that are to blame, and it's a faceless group of people that we've decided is woke and DEI, pro DEI and pro CRT and anti you guys, and they're calling you Nazis and all that. I would be wary of those people because they're directing you to do a thing. They're directing you to do violence.
They're perverting the moment. They're
Mhm.
calling for the kind of violence that you say in this moment is abhorrent and unacceptable.
Yeah.
I would say that those kind of hate merchants and those kind of disingenuous political players are more egregious in their reaction to this than the people who are celebrating
Yeah.
this guy's
I'll be
murder.
fair. I did not celebrate it. I don't think we get anywhere with this. Um, like I said, I'm not shedding a tear for the guy either. I'm just kind of somewhere in the middle. Um, I don't like when anybody goes down like that. At the same time, like I was actually preparing to talk about the bombing during the negotiations for the peace in Israel, and how one of the negotiators' sons was killed during that. Um, it's yeah, the world is pretty fucked up. But looking at the United States and looking at the context in which he was killed, like I am a person that believes we're in a civil war. When you have 5 different National Guards in D.C., and you've got Texas National Guard on the board of Illinois, and the governor having to talk constantly about, hey man, don't bring troops into here. We don't want you here. Um, and Supreme Court saying it's okay to uh roust people like me on the street and out of their cars. Like, we're in something of a civil war. There's one side of the political spectrum wants to roll protections back. They're looking at same-sex marriage, they're looking at interracial marriage. They want to roll things back, and they're the party that's in full power right now. They have all branches of government, and I would include the judiciary in that. um, that's the context in which I know we don't know who did it, uh, but if you're asking me to guess, which you're not, um, but somebody fired a shot across the bow and said, "This guy's somebody we need to take off the board," and that alone, all of that I just said, should give people pause to be pointing fingers either way and to stop and go, you know what? In June, there was a political assassination in Minnesota. Guys showed up dressed as cops to, the politician's door and killed that person, and wounded their partner, killed another, was on their way to kill 2 other people, had a list of 45 Democrats that they were going to kill. And they looked like they were prepared to do that. Um, both these things should make everybody stop and dial it back and not say, this is aha, what I knew about the other side is all confirms that, and have conversation. Because that's the way forward. That's the way out is, and I'm filibustering, but there's a guy named Derek Black, who is the son of a guy that runs the Daily Stormer, which is a take on Der Stormer, which is a Nazi propaganda magazine or newspaper that would focus on Jewish crime and other things. And the Daily Stormer is like a very old, in terms of the internet. It's like goes back to the early days, and it's a white supremacist, hive of news, and as a hub for people to connect. And Derek um, is a guy that came up, I think, with the phrase "white nationalist" or started using that phrase. And he's young; he's like in his 20s, and actually he goes by she now. Um, which is a whole other weird addendum to the story. But they went off to school, to college, fully a Nazi, fully, white nationalist, spreading that ideology, wanted to be kind of a Charlie Kirk, would reach out to the youth and was going to take over the torch. Ended up going to college, meeting a bunch of people that were different than him. Everybody found out who he was. And rather than vilify him, this group of liberals or progressives or whatever started inviting him over for, like, I think it was like they invited him over for Seder. They invited him over for like Saturday dinners, and they all sat around and talked. And he converted and was like, renounced white nationalism, came out. You can look at it. There's an article called The White Flight of Derek Black, and is now an anti-racist. Was like, in the belly of the beast, and is now on the other side. And that came through meeting people that were different than him. Now they've come out as trans. So I'm actually using the wrong pronouns, but that's a whole separate issue. But this person came to terms with who they are in the world, and who they are in relation to other people by having the conversations we're talking about, and trying to find out their true nature.
I thankfully don't believe we're in a civil war.
Hmm.
I think we're in a war of ideas, and the civility of the conversation is continuing to wane. But we're not
Hmm.
at war yet.
Hmm.
These flare ups like Jan 6 and like um, these shooter manifestos like you describe and hit lists and such, like
Uvalde.
these flare-ups are lack of civility. This moment, if it is what you describe, ultimately this Charlie Kirk moment is what you describe, then yes, this is that. But the opportunity for the exchange of debate of ideas is still on the table. It's still there. It still can be had. These changes can still be made. And if we engage that, we do not have to get to the stage of war if we can maintain our civility in the exchange of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Once we cross that Rubicon and war ensues, then yeah, it's much, much too late. But don't be fooled by the fact that the men in power and the women in power right now are in fact in power. They are in power because their ideas are either supported or not effectively countered, and people are
Hmm.
not listening to each other. And we haven't collectively decided that this idea is the one we're all on board with. Even a lion's share of us, just having a thin majority isn't enough for either Democrat, Republican, or the broader left or the broader right. We got to have a consensus, and we haven't had that in a while. But if we continue to evolve as a society through discourse, honest, if not debate, listening. Let's start by listening. And it's a hard time to listen for everybody.
Well,
But
maybe that's the jumping off, is like, because the debating thing, like Kirk kind of got that going, and now with Jubilee is like, let's
yeah,
have these debates. But listening is the thing, and maybe that's the next step, is like we get to this place where it's like, look, I'm not looking to debate you. Tell me what you think, and I'm going to listen to what you say. War is boxing, boxing is war, or whatever. Uh, and it's still one that I wasn't like, huh, you're right. It was like, well, that's a fucking wild thing to say to me at half hour before we go on stage. It was a fellow actor, and I don't know if he had heard it before, or it was like it came to him in the moment. But I was like, it's one of those things that sounds profound, and I'm just gonna like hold it and think about it. Uh, but I think, yeah, you're right. And also something you said made me think, um, is this the moment that a legit third party, not the libertarians or the Greens, but like a legit party that pulls the independents from both sides, of the people that are like me, that are like, I don't really want to vote for Biden, but the alternative is a fascist in Trump. Uh, but maybe, we find an anti-war party in a group that's like, look, here's actual ideas that are not, I'm not the other side, or let me be afraid of the other side, but like Medicare for all, taxing the rich, no more foreign wars, you don't fund genocide, like popular ideas. Maybe this is the time for that group to galvanize and to form a real political party that actually, is progressive and not just like this huge tent that uh, gets all out of shape because there's too many people in it.
Let me offer a prescription.
Hmm.
For those of us who are affected positively or negatively, maybe if you're indifferent, but certainly are emotionally invested in what's happening in society and these ideas and their effect on it, take this moment to reach out to someone with whom you likely disagree, but is feeling an intense emotion about what we just experienced in the last 24 hours. I know people who I would call friends who have posted about this murder in such an emotional way that shocked me because not only did I not know that they had an affinity for this person, but that they would be so emotionally affected by his murder. And not
Yeah.
just, it's not, again, I can't just excuse it saying, oh, it's just you're affected this way by violence or murder or gun violence. It's not that because there's so much of that happening every day. You're not
No.
putting these heartfelt posts out from people I just had no idea. So it immediately made me think differently of the person and maybe put a little like, oh, so you're mourning this person that emotionally. So that means everything I've heard in these last 24 hours or know about this guy's ideology. Now I'm revisiting it on you. He's no longer the guy putting it forward. You're the person who's holding this up. And everything that he's said that I've heard, now I'm saying you believe it. And so it could easily begin a distancing between me and that person. If the person had posted about their father or mother having died or their child being murdered, I would have reached out because I know they're hurting. And I'd have been
Right.
like, if nothing else, offer some condolences and ask if there's anything I could do or you want to talk about it. For the people that I would consider friends, if I had seen a post like that and the way they're expressing their pain, that would be my reaction to that. But because of the individual that they're mourning, I didn't even consider doing that. All I'm doing now is judging them by whom they mourn.
No,
So,
that was yesterday, man. It was just
yeah.
funny.
What I'm
Uh,
saying though, let's those of us who think that we are still in an exchange of ideas and we're not yet at war, then let's not turn on our neighbors. Let's not have fathers turn on sons and brothers turn on each other. Let's call those people who are hurting right now and listen. Don't call them to tell them what a fucking piece of shit Charlie Kirk is or how they shouldn't be mourning or how you're not mourning. Just listen. Just make that the first exercise. See if you can get off the phone without employing any of your judgment onto them or imbuing them with your ideals in the first exchange. Let that exchange be one sided and see if that doesn't begin the path to a more open conversation down the line.
but
This is just a
here's a
prescription.
counterpoint to that, and I think that's great advice. I'm a Mexican American who's had to deal with racism my whole life. Living as a California, they've tried to make it, put it into law. Now my neighborhood is under siege. Not just the one I do theater in Boyle Heights, uh, but literally, like I live in the suburbs, man. Like when everybody was going, oh my God, they're sending the National Guard, and I had people from out of the state, like, are you guys okay? Yeah, I live in Sherman Oaks. Like, it's not. Uh, but now it's everywhere I go. Uh, I'm either seeing trucks that I think are ICE, or it's actually, people are being pulled out blocks from my house. Um, as a I don't know if I'm a liberal or a progressive. I don't those labels don't have a lot of meaning. I'm an open-minded guy who believes we're all one and that we're all sharing this rock and that we should learn how to get together. How much grace, how much space do I have to, and how much of a large of a bridge do I have to build for people that espouse white nationalist ideas and that want people like me to be vilified and pulled over with guns and think that's fine and held up
Your
as though.
friends, Gabe. I'm not saying pull some random off of Twitter. I'm saying
Well, I'm saying
you know people who
no, but
you
that's what I'm
consider
saying.
friends. Yeah, but who you consider friends who are mourning this person who you consider abhorrent, and
But
you're
who
ascribing to
also
them his beliefs,
but who
which
also
may or may not
voted
be accurate.
but
Sorry.
who also voted for mass deportations and also
Okay.
voted for all the shit that's going on. Like how I mean, like I already as a progressive already have my arms wide open and are welcoming to people. It's those people that are shutting me out and I've
Pick a
still got to
person,
come to
though.
them.
Pick a person. Again, start with whatever it is that your relationship is initially based on, which is clearly not these ideological politics. It's whatever made you friends in the first place. And these politics and this ideology shit is what's driven you apart. But you know this person. I'm just saying, pick one person that you actually consider a friend, not a random,
Yeah.
somebody you care about and are maybe distancing yourself from because you recognized before today or yesterday that they were had these leanings. I've got a handful of people who I didn't even know had these leanings.
Oh
And
wow.
some that I did, and I have distanced myself from them, but
So,
I'm still like, all right, whatever, you'll figure it out. I don't want to get too far off the because there's a principle I want to end with, and,
okay.
and it is this empathy, right? It is not yet this conversation I'm asking people to have, which I have to do myself. I haven't done it. I called you. Well, I know we're not going to be too far apart on this shit. And you're a friend. We don't, you know what I mean? We're not
Yeah,
butting
yeah.
heads on ideology. Even if we don't agree, we're not butting heads. So I didn't call anybody yet either. So I have to do this as well. And I have people in mind. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is going to be a difficult call to start, but I'm going to try my own medicine, right? It is that empathy. Real empathy doesn't require you to like them. But I'm saying start with somebody you do like so it's a little bit easier.
Yeah, I'm
It
actually
doesn't
thinking of a
require you to
specific
be
person. Yeah.
to submit to their way of thinking or to employ yours onto them. It just requires for you to see somebody who's in pain, who's suffering, and offer some amount of deference to them in that moment. And in this way, I'm saying, listen, let them get it off their chest. Let them just talk about how they feel. And you can offer the leading question without coming with the hammer behind it. How do you feel
Very
having
hard
seen
like that.
someone like this? Like, let them get it off and try not to counter them. And let
Yeah.
that whole conversation be about them and how they feel and that like that while they're in that moment. And I can't guarantee it, but I do believe that empathy is a powerful thing, and so is sincerity. If you can do that sincerely, without being snide about it and without betraying the thing that I've asked you to do, which is not come back at them, then I think the gate will open and the next conversation you have will be more of a back and forth. They'll trust you more. You'll feel better about the conversation because I think empathy begets empathy. You'll probably
Well,
understand a little better, even if they're still wrong, where they're coming from, how these feelings. Okay, well, this isn't a person who just doesn't care about murder. They just don't see my people as human, or they don't see what's happening in Gaza as a genocide because they're so pro Christianity and their interpretation of it that they think this is what God wants. Like these are the kind of revelations you find out about people. Like, oh, the
oh,
way
it's
you
fun.
got to this,
Yeah.
while it still does not jive with my worldview, makes me better understand that you're not a bad person. It's just your perspective is so far off from where I'm coming from that we've got a lot of work to do to get to the same place on how we see the world.
Well,
And
and
if we can stop,
we're so a la carte in terms of our information space. Like I was seeing people, I'm in like a bunch of different like conservative threads and seeing conservatives not even really be honest about I was like, are they not being honest about who Charlie Kirk is? Or are they only just picking and choosing the parts of him that align with what they think and then the ugly stuff, they kinda, "Well, I don't really believe that, so I'm gonna, like," you know,
Yeah,
that doesn't get
yeah.
in my bubble, and that's wild to me, you know? I'm
I'm
like,
not being honest about what boxing is, but I do love it, and I felt the need to defend it, and I just wanna talk about the parts of it that make my argument for why it's infallible palatable. And I will
yeah.
talk over the parts that are inconvenient. I will continue to go back to a very narrow, basic truth that's hard for you to refute because it is true. It just lacks nuance and context. And
Yeah,
that is a real tool of the right and the left when you're backed into a corner about defending something that you love and truly believe in while having to obfuscate, which is a great word of yours, the inconvenient truths. And we could have had that debate about boxing this entire hour, and I got no closer to your point of view, and I could have sounded kind of irrefutable because what I was saying was true. And if I stayed in that narrow space, no, but what I was saying was true. It just lacked context, and I ignored the nuances of what you were saying, which were true, but not nearly as provable. What I was saying, you can't disprove, but it still isn't honest, right? It's
right.
lacked a certain honesty because I was being defensive about something I love. That is a tool that is employed with these so called Jubilee debates and all this shit. Let's
Yeah,
get out of that space and get into something sincere. That's when you'll find genuine empathy that doesn't have a woke accent. It's humanity that's the accent.
yeah.